Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Evelyn Cotter, the founder and CEO of Seven Career Coaching, and we've got Will this evening, William Graham, who is a master of many things. He's a mindfulness master, he's a peak performance coach, a leadership coach, and also has a background in psychology. So no better man to help us in this challenging and strange times that we're finding ourselves in. We're going to be talking about some really great things. I mean, we've just been asked the perfect point, Krishna. Myself and Will were just discussing self-talk, which is a really important part of peak performance. Will's going to be talking you through the aspects of really how to keep yourself performing and living in a way that is healthy, that allows you as well to get the best from yourself, and keep your days productive, constructive, and ultimately just feeling, relatively good in the work that you're doing or in whatever you're using to spend your current time. Some people aren't working right now, we're aware of that. So some of the key points that Will's going to go over are how to get yourself into an optimal state and why that's really important for you. There's many ways to do that. Some of that is around the self-talk. It's the cognitive aspects of how we function. So Will's got a lot to help you around that. And then also just how to manage adversity, deal with adversity, and how to use this as an opportunity to develop yourself personally and professionally. There's opportunity in this for everybody. It's really how we choose to see it. And obviously as well, things like mental health, how to manage your stress and anxiety. That's something that Will is fantastic at and helps a lot of our clients, has helped a lot of our clients over the years. I know I can think of quite a few clients actually you've worked with at Seven who've dealt with major anxiety issues, and Will has worked wonders with them, and people have achieved really, really impressive results in spite of really major challenges. So I'm confident that everyone's going to find something really useful from today. And just to let you know, in terms of the format, we're happy to take questions and comments as we go. So like Krishna, jump in if there's something you want to ask or you want to get specific on, or just contribute, feel free. And also towards the end of the hour, Will is going to give us a few minutes where we can actually test out his mindfulness meditation technique, just to get a little flavor. And he's going to end by giving some resources, or we'll follow up in the email by giving you some resources so you can take that away and actually implement that from today if you like. So Will, starting off, in terms of where people are at right now in this current climate, like what do you think are the probably number one things people can be doing in terms of the challenges they're facing around adversity, uncertainty, and also living and working at home with probably their families, or being very enclosed right now? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Evelyn. Appreciate it. And then I love the warm introduction. It feels good, actually. Thank you. Little praise. It's always good. So first things first, when dealing with any kind of change, any type of adversity, any kind of uncertainty, typically people don't like that. It's not how we're kind of wired. And so if there isn't a sufficient amount of calm, kind of baseline, you're not going to adapt as well as you could. The fight or flight system kicks in, essentially. The fear overruns ourselves. And now we start behaving and acting in ways that just aren't rational or useful. So one of the first things is really to kind of regulate yourself by calming yourself down. And it's quite easy. I mean, you can just take in, say, 3 to 10 breaths in through the nose, hold it for a few moments in the chest, out through the mouth, and actively slowing yourself down. And there's a nice little metaphor here to this, in that imagine an ocean. There's a hurricane happening on top. And because of the hurricane, the top of the ocean has lots of waves. But as you go further towards the bottom, because of the mass of the water, it actually becomes more and more still. And if you reach the bottom of the ocean, it's completely still, as if there are no turbulence happening on the surface. And when you do that breathing exercise, that's essentially the experience. It takes you from that kind of beta wave reactive mode of thinking and brings you down into an alpha state. Your physiology, your mind, your prefrontal cortex, your parasympathetic nervous system all come back online. And now you're in a place where you can actually start dealing with these challenges constructively. So You could frame it in terms of like the inner game and how do you manage your emotion, your physiology, your mindset and thought patterns. And self-talk is absolutely included in that, as well as your environment. What kind of habits do you set up? Where do you do which activities? And we can get further into that. But I think both of those things are going to be highly relevant and useful for people.
Great. And in terms of, I mean, what most people are finding right now is obviously a huge change. So working remotely, I think for a lot of people, they're finding it's sort of a welcome change. You don't have the hustle bustle of the commute. You don't have that crazy hamster wheel feeling where you're going from work to the gym to dinner to friends. It's the weekend, it's Monday. It's just constantly go, go, go. So I think a lot of people are finding that sort of there's a gift in the slowdown, but also there's challenges in living much smaller lives, and sort of being in environments that maybe aren't suited to work, for instance. What are the things people can be doing to sort of make the best use of their, if they're working from home, they're not really able to go out that much, they're feeling maybe claustrophobic. What sort of how do you think people can make that better to experience on a day-to-day basis? How can they use their thinking to improve that scenario?
Yeah, totally. So in starting with the inner, I think is the way to go. Firsthand is to realize first a bit of information is that all these different situations and circumstances come up. And what happens is that it may be painful and may create anxiety, but typically it's the ruminations. It's the way that we hang on to those thoughts of anger, of frustration, of anxiety, and these play relentlessly. And we get caught up into that state where it could have been just a fleeting moment and then you would have moved on, but now you've clung and attached to it. And now you're wearing yourself down moment by moment.
We all know what that's like, don't we?
Yeah.
I'm laughing because I funnily enough do that sometimes.
Yeah, ditto, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a part of the human condition, right?
Yeah. And one way you can break that is just to set up like times throughout the day where, regardless of what happens, maybe put a reminder in your phone. If you use your calendar a lot, set up reminders that way. Put notes in your environment to check in. And it could be as simple as, again, doing that breathing exercise and then going into awareness. What emotions are taking place? And now here's a practical exercise you can use. So you get the reminder, you get the trigger, and however it may come in, and then you engage in the breathing process. That sets the state. Again, you get into a calm frame of mind. And then when you engage in the emotion, you're heightening your self-awareness. We want to take your resolution from kind of like a TV screen, if you were to imagine it kind of fuzzy and not quite being able to make out what's there. We want to crank that baby up to high resolution. And that enables your self-mastery. And so instead of having emotions and states kind of run the show and now you're just carried along, the Mahayana tradition in Buddhism would say that we're like people wrapped up in ropes, locked in a safe, tumbling down a river, that kind of thing. It's like we're not in control. The emotions are in control, and it's just our conditioning that's running the show. So anyway, to get control of that, the breathing process slows us down, and then noting what's going on. So you could run through the body. What's happening? You might get a sensation of tightness in the chest, a kind of weight on the shoulders. You might feel yourself curling over in a position like this. If you have anxiety, you might be around the neck, essentially kind of bracing yourself in. And every time that you're doing that, you're actually sending signals to the mind that are actually putting you in that state and reinforcing it. So by becoming aware of it, and the trick with this is that you want to be curious and non-judgmental. You don't want to identify with it as in, I am suffering in this. You just want to note the suffering. Oh, these are these emotions happening in this body. I know the body's mine, but I'm not identifying with it. I'm just noting it and getting very aware of it. What the magic of that is that once that emotion comes up, it starts to transform and starts to then dissipate. And so instead of hanging on to it, you become aware of it and starts to release. And so that starts to free things up. And then you can start moving into a more optimal state. So there's the inner.
And we'll just checking in, just to keep people, especially people who are joining. So what you're saying is put systems in place to check in with yourself regularly throughout your day. It could be as simple as a rubber band. It could be a reminder on your phone. It could be notes around your workspace or your home. And really, it's to check in to see what state am I in right now. Are my emotions running the show? Am I in my conditioning? Am I kind of basically the passenger to all that stuff, or am I actually in control? I think probably for a lot of people, especially right now, and I can even feel it myself, if I was checking in with myself several times a day, I think a lot of the times I would stop and say, wow, I'm the passenger right now. But what you're saying is when you stop, then take that time it could be just a few minutes, you take some deep breaths, maybe 10 deep breaths or something, and really just get yourself from that turbulent kind of top sea level down to more of a deep stillness, and really sort of be intentional, I guess, about getting back into the driving seat and then moving on with the next part of your day. Am I kind of summarizing?
Perfection. Amazing.
Yes. Well,
yeah, love that. Much better the second time around.
Well, just a few things. So Tom was just asking, he said, can you just quickly explain what the alpha and beta state is? And Krishna was just asking earlier, she said, what's the fastest way to reduce negative self-talk? I think that's a bigger question. So let's get to that in a second. But what are the, I'm sure a lot of people probably do know what the alpha and beta states are, but maybe just especially you know so much. Will is an absolute wealth of knowledge from psychology, meditation, like personal development, coaching. There's really nothing that you haven't sort of trained in and specialized in for years, and you apply in your own life. You walk the talk, which is really important. Yeah. But do you want to just explain to people what that means and why it's relevant here?
Yeah, thanks, Evelyn. So the beta alpha, you can imagine like a frequency. So like you're tuning a radio station, or even a pitch, like you sing a higher versus a lower note. The higher note has a higher frequency. And when they measure somebody's brain activity, you can see what type of frequency they're resonating at for that time. And so beta, when we're in stressful situation or kind of common waking day state, that's typically what we're in. When we get into alpha, now we're in that type of flow zone where we can be present with something. Time disappears. We're really in the moment. There's a sense of well-being and calm that sets in. And just to kind of run through the states, you can go below that and get into the theta, which now is they call it the unconscious bridge. It's something you might get into when you're in sleep. And then delta is the lowest level, and that's where you're in deep sleep. You're in a restorative state. So anyway, when we're awake, it's optimal for us and these states vary. I mean, it depends on what situation you're in and what's going to be optimal for you. But regardless, staying in an alpha state when doing your work can be at a load of value. You're really creative. You're intuitive. A lot of best work can happen there.
So when you think of peak performance, because that was the title of today's webinar, really what you're aiming for is to be in the flow state, right? Where it's you're kind of moving and it's instinctual, it's natural to you, and you're really it doesn't feel like work. It's not kind of driven by what's the word, forced. It's not forced, it's natural.
Yeah, and it goes in stages. And so at the beginning it could feel forced, it could feel difficult, but then there's eventually this breaking point where now it does feel like the word, like flow, like you're literally flowing in the activity. And there's like ranges of it. You can go really deep, you can stay in the shallow end, just depending on what situation you're in. But getting into a flow state regardless is going to be optimal for performance.
Yeah. And Krishna was just asking there, Krishna, this is something we're going to come to, but she's just asking what instructional books or resources on the subject of self-talk and meditation. Well, towards the end of this hour, Will is actually kindly going to talk us through a mindfulness meditation technique, and we can all test it out for 1 to 2 minutes. Sorry, Krishna. Christian is a guy. I'm not sure why I assumed you were a woman. I don't really know. Excuse me. But that's just a weird thing. Smiley face, laughing. Thank you. Be patient with me. Be patient with me. So at the end, we're gonna do a little taster of meditation. But Will, let's go on to talking about self-talk then. How important is self-talk, and how do we kind of again even distinguish what our self-talk is and what the impact it's having on us, on our day and on our performance?
Yeah, totally. So self-talk is a massive impact on the way you perceive things. And I think just kind of a fun, quick little story is that I met this person who is like a long distance rifleman, and he had gone so far as to win the gold medal for Britain. And when he was in that moment, he had loads of anxiety coming up, final stages, the pressure was on. And the power of self-talk is really shown there, where he was able to switch that around, because the same kind of emotional cocktail of anxiety can also be excitement. And he took control of that. The thought patterns were originally fear, but then he flipped it to, this is what I live for. I'm here for this reason. This is the thing. This is the reason why I practice and I do all this work, that I'm engaged in this. This is, this is when I'm at my best. And that helped him to reframe it. So you can take control of the way your mind's going through self-talk. And when you change that perception, you experience it differently. And the thing is that we have self-talk that just kind of operates all the time. And if we were to look at that more clearly, we'd see that, it's probably not optimal a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And so one way to become aware of that is, again, the slowing down process just helps you to become present. And then, writing it down in a more detached way. So, what thoughts and emotions am I having? And just listing it down. Well, there's this thought, there's this pattern, there's this belief that I'm having. There's these experiences, these emotions. This is what's happening here. So you become aware of it. You start to externalize it. When you externalize it, when you're writing it, it becomes easier to work with. And then you can take it and reframe it. It's like, okay, so then where, as you had mentioned in the beginning, what's the gift in this? Where's the opportunity? What would be a more empowering way of interpreting this situation, of guiding myself through this? And you can dive into things like Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck. You can go into great detail there on how does she actually frame things. What is that methodology all about? There's things like Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman originally and his team. Phenomenal way of interpreting adversity and challenges. And what you do is, and self-compassion, that's another one. When, the adversity, the challenges are really on, having a self-compassionate self-talk is one of the best ways that you can actually deal with adversity well. Any setbacks, any failures, it's right there when you need it to pick you up. And it's far better in building your sense of self-esteem and self-worth as you are taking on these challenges. So that's all really quite useful.
Just to ask kind of a question. So if you think of learned optimism and self-compassion, how does that really work? Is that someone that's just making a decision consciously to say, I'm going to start focusing more on a better outcome, or I'm going to start focusing in a way that is more hopeful. I'm going to choose to cultivate thoughts that align more with a positive outcome, and I'm going to either ignore or reframe when I catch myself having more negative. How does it actually work for people kind of watching this? What can they actually do?
Yeah, that's perfect. It starts off with making a choice. It's taking control of those thought patterns. They run automatically. You don't want that. You want what's optimal. So let's say in the instance you're pessimistic. Not that you are pessimistic, but the thought patterns are. And so, setting up that routine, again, like triggers, checking in with yourself often. What's happening here? Doing a little research and finding out what is optimism, what is pessimism. It gives you more awareness. You can start seeing these things more clearly. And then engaging in that journaling exercise, doing that a few times a day. And if you're having a real difficult time, do it as often as needed. And when you reframe it and you get it right, you'll feel the difference. You'll see things in a different way, and it'll feel like weights lifted off your shoulders. So you'll want to do it again. The positive impact is right there.
Yeah. Can I give you an example? Because it's something that I'm often asked, for kind of by entrepreneurs or people looking to set up their own business. I'm often asked sort of what habits they think that I have, that may have helped me to on the journey that I've been on. And one of the things that I did, I found it, like when I started Seven, and when I started as a coach, mainly when I started 7 years ago, I found it was really, really tough going. And what I always had was my trusty notebook and my pen. And you would never, I worked from home, and I had my laptop and my trusty, and when I wasn't getting what I wanted, so I wasn't getting floods of inquiries, I wasn't getting loads of journalists asking me for my comments, I wasn't getting, when you're not kind of there yet, it's hard to not focus on the lack. And what I did again and again, and I mean, I did this for years, when I wasn't getting what I wanted, I just sat down and I just really focused on the gratitude for the tiniest things, like I got one inquiry today. Yeah. Let's just really energize that, because that's better than nothing. And it was like, the way I kind of describe to people is it's like parenting a child. I was the parent and I was the child, because in that moment I didn't have, like, I had no other choice. To me, I had no plan B. So it was like I was pretty much going to do anything to make that succeed, because I felt, I mean, it's true, I'm pretty much unemployable. I'm kind of the classic entrepreneur. Like, you do not want me working for you, probably. I'm probably very good in some ways, but a nightmare in others. But the point is I had no plan B. So I did ridiculous things that even kind of felt silly. No one's watching you, right? But you still kind of feel silly, because you're like, why am I doing this? But it really worked. It really, really worked. I would just write, I would be grateful. Compassion was something I came to much later. And I think some people, I think a lot of people have a hard time with compassion, self-compassion. Do you think? Yeah,
and it's, it can seem kind of weird, being a man, it's, how is that useful? How's that powerful? How's that going to actually help me? Where's the utility in this? And so working through that and better understanding it. And I think it's just a really useful way for people to wrap their heads around it is, what would you say to your most beloved family member or beloved friend, right? And developing that narrative with yourself. It's that easy. And as you build that up over time, pretty soon that'll be the go-to way of interpreting situations. And it'll feel natural to you. You'll feel authentic. It won't feel weird or all these kind of beliefs and stuff pop up. It'll be real for you.
And being so learning to be more self-compassionate, it's something I think just in the way our culture is, we're not taught to be compassionate, full stop. I think that's a huge gift that COVID-19 is giving to us, because there is no such thing as boundaries. Or borders. I think that's a really interesting phenomenon that's happening right now. We're all kind of reduced to the same level because the virus doesn't care. We thought it only affected elderly people or vulnerable. Now we know that's not true. So it's kind of this weird equalizer that I'm talking to a lot of people, and I'm kind of feeling that myself. In terms of when you think of being self-compassionate, how does that help somebody in terms of performing better, in terms of their day-to-day output, or the quality of their day-to-day life?
Yeah, absolutely. So
I think that was a really interesting word that you used.
The criticism. So a lot of high performers like yourself, you set up really high standards. You're going for, big, hairy, audacious goals. You've got a vision and it's compelling. Other people who have, different standards, they have these expectations they put on themselves to really go after it. And the thing with high performers is that they might not want to give that up. They feel like this criticism, this kind of harshness, this kind of, stick mentality towards oneself is what's going to keep them going and moving and achieving in the way that they see fit. But it's really short-lived, and you're soon going to wear yourself out, and you'll crash and you'll burn, and you'll miss out on an opportunity. You won't be your best self when it really matters. What self-compassion does is it allows you to look at the situation, to experience that, and to learn and grow from that. You have a different, most importantly, an emotional response to that, one of love. And if you just think about that in terms of energy, excluding kind of the romantic components and everything else that might be around that, like that wholesome energy, you might say, is so useful, and it builds you up right when you need it. So you can look directly at the challenges, you can look directly at the faults, you can give yourself the words of encouragement and the emotional response needed to then start pick yourself up and start moving in the right direction in an optimal way. And it's been found to be one of the most useful self-talk forms that you can possibly have, especially when dealing with adversity. And when you're falling short on your own expectations and the standards you set yourself and everything else you use to build your self-esteem. Like, typically that stuff isn't going to endure. It's not, when the going gets tough, when adversity comes, when anything sets you back, it's just not there for you when you need it. It's kind of, you're building your house on faulty ground. So self-compassion gives you that amazingly solid foundation to move forward. And the more that you have that with yourself, the easier that is to have with other people. So when you're dealing with challenges with family, with friends, with colleagues, with your team members, it becomes the go-to narrative, the go-to approach, which really binds people together. And, when dealing with these types of adversities, this isolation component, being able to really connect with people in an authentic, vulnerable, transparent, yet empowering and kind of love-filled way is so important. I found a lot of people, actually, even though we're working through the screens and having the calls, you can have amazing connection with people. You can have deeper conversations than you'd ever have amongst the kind of daily grind. So in that way, it can be a real opportunity to connect.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, that's just an amazing point. Well, I just put in the chat box, but self-compassion is really that strong foundation for solid self-esteem. And one of the interesting things, I've had a lot of dealings with people who've had serious mental health issues and nervous breakdowns and, all of that. But one of the common denominators I found was the quality of their self-talk in that, they spoke to themselves. You wouldn't speak to an inanimate object. I wouldn't even say you wouldn't speak to a dog like that. I wouldn't insult dogs. You wouldn't even speak. I wouldn't even, I remember hearing, say someone kind of bumped into something and the way they would berate themselves. And I remember thinking, wow, if that's how they speak out loud, imagine what's going on in there. But the interesting thing with self-talk, right, is it's learned. Unfortunately, we learn it from when we're in kind of early developmental stages. We learn it from the quality of the talk going on around us, from our parents or culture or teachers. So there can be kind of big differences, right, in how people speak to themselves. And then I think just from the question Krishna asked, I think one of the biggest things is bringing that into the light. You can't deal with something if you don't see it, or if you don't hear it. Like, how do you distinguish what your self-talk is? I know you mentioned journaling. Is there any other ways? And obviously being present, like you said, checking in with yourself. Are there any other ways that you found help your clients and people can kind of try?
Yeah, absolutely. So videotaping yourself, instead of writing it down, have that.
That's scary.
Yeah, it is. It's weird. You're definitely not going to show anybody.
How would that work? How would that work? You kind of get your phone and then you just speak loudly to yourself in the way you usually about, say, something you didn't work out for you, maybe.
Yeah, just as like reflection, no self-talk exercise, just how it is for you, and see how that is. Yeah, and so you gain a lot of awareness, all the facial expression, the emotion, everything else around it. It's like you see a lot, and even just that alone, you'll, without even reflecting on it or working with it, just it in itself, you'll, and if you do it again, just even a few minutes later, you're going to start seeing a shift and a change typically. And then if you apply the self-compassionate component and do it well, and so on this note, if you want to get phenomenal process for this, journaling exercises, self-talk approaches, meditations, check out Kristen Neff. It's KristenNeff, and she's, I think, at selfcompassion.org. And you can go into the exercise section, and she's got a whole list of things that you can try out.
Wow.
So you can work with them. Yeah. So you can actually go through one exercise and then do that on the video form. You can start and go back and watch that for yourself and just see what comes up for you. I found that with clients, with my own self. Just a game changer.
Wow. Okay. I love that. That's fantastic. A great resource. So, well, moving on. So one of the things we were talking about at the beginning of this was adversity, and certainly the climate that we're in right now. It's an opportunity for people to reassess, redefine, but also you used the term earlier, self-mastery, which is, I mean, anyone that's, like ourselves, interested or passionate about learning, development, personal development, that's what our kind of end goal is, self-mastery. But talk me through a bit about, what is the gift in this particular time for people, and really how can they use it to improve or, come out of this better? I mean, certainly come out of it in one piece is probably the kind of basic, level. But really the opportunities we can all use this to become better and improve the connections that we have, the quality of our day-to-day lives, even just appreciating the simple things. But, from your perspective, how do people kind of use adversity to become better, and what are the sorts of things they can redefine about themselves or start to think about right now?
Yeah, that's fantastic. So challenge hits, and whatever your program, your conditioning, your level of training, that's what you're bringing to it. So it's the opportunity. It's like, kind of, if you want to use a metaphor of like a weight with a muscle, the resistance to help build the strength. You need the adversity to actually challenge your psychology to improve.
Yeah. Yes.
So the first thing is like, okay, here it is, gaining awareness of it. And again, that breathing exercise, first regulating yourself, because if you can get into a calm state, now you can start being constructive and start working through that. Becoming mindful and aware of it. What emotions are you picking up? And again, the more awareness you put into your body scanning, the higher the resolution is going to be for you, the more aware you'll become. And so you can start picking these subtle cues up before it even hits. Like, okay, I noticed the shoulder starting to tense and I'm coming into the stance. What is that? It's anger. Okay, great. Before you get this full-blown experience, from now you're down the rabbit hole and you got to wait until the storm subsides to start again. So it allows you to start picking these things up readily, and then you can start adjusting and shifting in another direction. So then you can apply things like, growth-oriented approach. What can I learn from this situation? How can I become even better because of this? Even though I didn't get what I was after, let's dig in, as you said beforehand, like praising the effort. This is one small step. I can feel good about that. I got that because of the choices I made, because of the actions I took, because of how I dealt with this. I can feel good about that, and then savoring that, letting that to emotionally land.
Yeah. I think one of the things I've noticed from coaching clients, I remember it's something I've learned myself, and I still need to remind myself of. But I remember with so many clients, high performers in particular, not taking the time to savor their achievements.
Yeah.
So just constantly having this compulsive need to keep achieving, because actually the hole never got smaller; it actually got bigger, because they never stopped and just savored and let things settle. Which, if you think what's happening right now, I mean, everything's settling, and it's like, maybe this is an opportunity to savor, where we're at, what we have, and move forward in a new way on an individual level and on a collective level. That's what's really exciting.
Yeah.
So I was just putting the comments here. So owning your successes, or whatever small achievements, but I think your point was fantastic, which is actually savoring, taking the time to savor, the positives, basically, I think is really strong. Let me go back up to make sure that James asked, how do we identify our peak and know that we are reaching our potential? Really good question.
That's a good one. So, there's loads of ways, but so when you set a goal, you want to get that level of challenge right. And so you can have something that's just too far, and you'll fail and fail and fail and fail on the way there. And depending on how you deal with failure, it actually can be a difficult thing, where now all of a sudden you're ruining your ability to continue, because learned helplessness starts to set in. Even before you know it, like it just starts to seep in as an emotion, a state, and you start backing off. And so then it's like bringing that next mile step, that next goal, a little bit shorter, a little bit more achievable, so you can actually get some gratification there. And then again, savoring and getting that win along the way, kind of piece by piece by piece, as you do it. And kind of the inverse, it can be too low. There's not enough challenge, and so you never feel like you're stretching. You never feel like you're growing like you could be. And so it's about getting that balance right and setting yourself up. And the peak, I think, is when have gained a lot of momentum. Say if you're on a process to achieving something, you're seeing those wins and they're really stacking up. And peak might be, well, let's say practically or in work, you're in the situation, your attention keeps dialing in, your attentional capacity. You're just more and more focused. The multitasking, the distractions that might come up, you're getting better and better and better and better and better at bringing yourself to what's at hand. And then another element of peak might be regulating your emotion. So can you stay in joy? Can you stay in so it's one of the most positive and also the highest energy forms you can be in. So when being creative, being productive, trying to think in an innovative way, that's an amazing place to be. And so it's about how much mastery do you have? Can you regulate yourself and bring yourself into these optimal states? When you get hit with adversity, how long does it take you to come back and then optimize yourself? So that's all part of it. I mean, there's so many factors that when you say peak that go into it. So if there's something more specific that you're dealing with, throw it into the chat. And otherwise, I hope that's useful.
I think that's awesome. I mean, one of the things actually that I think there's so many aspects to peak performance, isn't there? But how you come back from adversity, how quickly you bounce back I see that as something that really kind of, it cuts the wheat from the chaff. It really shows people's character. And I think that's, a lot of that is down to, I know for myself, there's times where I bounce back so quickly. Even earlier, I was speaking to somebody who was really going through like some challenging times. And one of the things I reminded them of was everything is a psychological game. Like when we're dealing with very high levels of stress and uncertainty, if you kind of detach, I know that's sort of a Buddhist philosophy, but detach, don't take it so seriously. It's just a psychological game. That's life. That's the human experience. If you're aware that you're in a game, you can kind of get some sort of sense of control, even if it's just, a perspective, even if it's not really real. It's just a way of framing it to say, this will pass, or a solution will come, or I'm just not going to take this so seriously right now that I'm kind of weighted down by the heaviness of that. So I love this. So joy really is the highest kind of energetic state. It's the most optimal state. For you, you're saying self-mastery is when you're able to regulate your state, and then how long you're able to regulate that for is a key factor of peak performance, but also the momentum that you're going in and how focused you're able to be on achieving your goals, and also, being in flow, which is, amazing. Can you give some examples, like well-known figures? I mean, you can sort of see people's success in many ways. There's so many ways that we kind of measure success, isn't there? But are there any really good examples of people that you think are kind of masters in this way that people may be aware of? I mean, it's obvious to think someone like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, people who are at the top of they're extraordinary people. I think it's fair to say, whether you like them or not is another, kettle of fish. But are there any sort of examples you can give of because I think modeling is a really powerful tool in coaching. One of the tools, really simple. I think a lot of people use this anyway. It's certainly an Instagram kind of meme. But one of the things I often use is in certain situations is how would Oprah think, or how would people that you aspire to be like, how would they approach this when I'm kind of really, really stuck, or I need just a kind of a refresh in how I'm kind of approaching something. Are there any, like, who are the models that you look to in terms of peak performance? Or is that something that you use? Maybe it's not.
No, absolutely. Jamie Wheel, in terms of, if you're into flow, he's going to be amazing for that. Steven Kotler, they both worked together and they created the Flow Genome Project. They've got loads of great insight, but I think they're phenomenal examples of what it really means to be in peak performance.
Just remind me of their names. We can email this when we email the recording to everybody after the webinar. We can put any kind of references we can put in. So let's not worry about it now. Okay.
Yeah. So Jamie Wheel and Steven Kotler on the compassion, ability to generate happiness. I would say Matthew Ricard. So it might not be it for everybody, but he's a Buddhist monk, been this way for about 40 years. And when they were doing the research at UW with Richard Davidson, and they have the largest collection of neuroscientists in the world looking at this, they found
what's the name of the association or the group?
University of Wisconsin, and Richard Davidson was the senior head researcher there.
And are you from Wisconsin originally?
I'm sorry? Oh, yeah.
You happen to be from Wisconsin originally.
Well, yeah, Iowa, and then I spent about a year and a half in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. So you've been there.
Yep. That's I was actually doing meditation courses there. So Richard Davidson was doing mindfulness workshops. And so I drop in there on Wednesday, and that same city they had the Dalai Lama's head instructor. It started this temple in 1988 called Deer Park. And so it started to collect all of these just amazing monks. And so it was like this 2,500-year-old tradition on psychology, and it's rigorous. And I'd be there checking that out, a couple times a week, definitely on Sunday, and then be over with leading neuroscience, exploring that and seeing their perspectives. And so I was loving that. I totally got my geek fix for that year and a half, and then from there I went on to study mindfulness in my master's program.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So let's get into more kind of practical things that people can be doing. So when it comes to, I think we covered optimal states pretty well. So really, an optimal state is when you're in a high energy state. So you're in joy. You're certainly relaxed, and if there's a few points that you've given around checking in with yourself, taking control of your emotions. So you're in the driving seat. Regularly checking in and breathing, obviously, in meditation, so you sort of get a base level that is more still. You're more grounded as the norm, and then of course when adversity hits or stress comes, you're not as reactive, right? So I think we've covered kind of self-talk, optimal states, and then self-mastery, I guess, is like, as you were saying, how long you can stay in an optimal state. What are the other things that people can learn about? I mean, obviously stress and anxiety is huge right now. One of the themes, we're doing all these webinars, we started our webinars series yesterday, and the theme in every webinar that we're doing so far is really, it's really about helping people to not just manage their stress and anxiety, but also get conscious around being in fear versus, which is an emotional state, right? It's like fear is almost kind of the other side of joy. And then, the idea is if you're watching the news constantly and everyone you are connecting with is talking about COVID-19, and how many deaths there were. And I just passed on the way to the shop earlier, I just passed two like clinics that were set up on the street for COVID-19. And it kind of had that, militarized kind of feeling around it. And there was all these kind of fences. They're clearly expecting hundreds and hundreds of people, or they're prepared for that, but hopefully that won't happen. But how can you help people right now to what are the practical ways they can stay out of a fear-based state, and how important is it to really kind of keep yourself managed and regulated around like stress and anxiety, and also people who may be in that state? How can you protect yourself to make sure that you're, staying consistently at least okay?
No, absolutely. So there's loads of ways. So one, in the external environment, so think of it as like the inner and outer. The outer would be, finding relevant information, like information that comes from credible sources on what actually this coronavirus is. Where is it impacting your local area? Maybe there's a local government or some type of official that way where you can get clear understanding of what's happening, and shutting down anything that's not relevant. People can get addicted to this fear, this sense of anxiety that comes about relentlessly checking it over and over again and not being constructive about this. So shutting that down and dialing in, being informed, being responsible, but at the same time, cutting yourself off from unnecessary fear. Having that kind of conversation with then I wanted to talk about people really stepping up as leaders, taking over your sovereignty, your ability to have choice in this matter of how you respond to it. Just because your environment, immediate family, the neighbors, the people you meet in public show up in a way, you can show the best of yourself at that time, and that can impact those around you. Having an attitude that is going back to compassion, but recognizing that everybody just wants to be happy. Everybody wants to be free of this type of fear and conditioning. That's what it basically comes down to, and we're all human. So acknowledging that from the get-go and then showing up as constructively as you are and letting the integrity of your character really shine through. Building that in within your kind of immediate circles, your relationships, your family, coming up with some kind of understanding or agreement, the people that you connect with online, and helping them to see the light and start to create these new norms where now you're being constructive about it. And you kind of have some psychological foundations built into those relationships. And as you come into the public, as you come into situations where, it might be a bit more adverse, trying to have a more dignified approach in the way you respond and relate to them. And that compassionate component actually is one of the best ways to prevent burnout. And so they found, say, with healthcare workers, they call it empathy burnout, where, they're engaged in this, they're involved in these experiences, and it starts to just wear them down. Whereas if you can maintain a compassionate approach, that perspective, that a narrative, literally just wishing them well, and may they be free from suffering, recognizing the likeness of you and them and common humanity, and just repeating that to yourself as you're engaging with these folks, acts like an emotional immune body. You can actually shift other. Yeah, that's really what it is. They did a great study. So Matthew Ricard, real quick. They went to a university. They wanted to see emotional contagion. They brought a professor in who was everybody agreed was the most difficult. So difficult, he wouldn't even show up to the experiment. So they went to the second most difficult. He showed up. Matthew Ricard shows in, and he's a master at meditation, about optimizing his states. He's been practicing this for 40 years. And so when they're measuring each other, typically within about 5 minutes, the person opposite of the difficult professor would start to get infected, so to speak. They could read their signals and how they're responding to the adversity. Whereas Matthew Ricard, because he had that solid foundation and had such resilience in that way, that the most dominant emotion won out essentially over time. And the individual who was quite difficult was enjoying themselves so much that even after 30 minutes, they didn't want to leave the conversation. And Matthew, for his own self and his own sake, never showed a sign of being, infected with that emotion of fear or anxiety or anger or resentment. So by practicing that, it's your own salvation as well as the salvation of other people. And it broadens your perspective. It allows you to get out of your own head and your own little world. And when you expand that perspective, you now have more capacity to deal with these things effectively. You've got more room to be creative, to be insightful, to, be resilient. So I'm a huge fan of compassion. The evidence shows its value here. And I think if people really take that on board and own that, be responsible for that in the way that they are with their family, their friends, their colleagues, their people they're indifferent to, better they'll be and the better everybody else will be.
It's it's an amazing point. Well, I love that because one of the things we were talking about earlier was how fear is contagious, but also leadership. Strong leadership can be contagious equally. But I love what you're saying. It connects perfectly. And one of the things I find really interesting is leadership is we often do things in leadership. You're a leadership specialist. We've got loads of leadership coaches and executive coaches, but actually you don't need to be a leader in your professional life to lead. You can lead with just the intention of, leading by example and setting a tone. Because as you just said there, if you choose to set a certain tone, whether it's going into fear, being compulsive and addictive around the constant need for this negative information and this sensationalism, and what are the numbers now, and all the negative things that politicians aren't doing, that's one way of being. You can also lead with, let's focus on we just had at 7 o'clock every night, all of our neighbors clap, we all clap. Yeah. And that, that really does it's so uplifting when we see the police driving by, or we see the doctors and nurses coming out onto the balcony of the hospital nearby us. It really is uplifting. Like, whenever I can, I will go out to the balcony. That's the highlight of our day, because it does raise the energy levels for all of us. And just even having a friendly hello to people that, we don't know them, we've never actually seen most of them before, and now all of a sudden we'll have a friendly little chat or a friendly little wave every night that we go out. But I think that's such an important thing. One thing to point out as well is everything that Will does, your approach is always evidence-based. You come from kind of a fairly academic background in a way. You're a psychologist and a coach, and then you kind of combined your meditation, mindfulness meditation with that. So you're sort of the experiential and the theoretical kind of beautifully wrapped up into one. So let's sort of end. If there's no other questions, I think one thing that I do think is really interesting, and I put it in the comment box, is people can get addicted to fear. How does that work? Not to spend too long on it, but I think right now I sometimes find it where I'm like, I haven't checked my phone in a few minutes, or how many numbers today, like how many died today? Like, is it getting better? I'm not necessarily looking for like something worse. I'm just thinking, I just have a need. I find myself in a habit where I have a need to know. I've stopped watching the news now, because actually it was serving me no good at all. And I prefer right now to be in a bubble, because we don't know how long we're going to be in this. And I've got other things to be doing, frankly. But just explain a little bit about the psychology around getting addicted to fear, and why does that happen, and how can we just kind of make sure to catch ourselves before that happens?
Yeah, I love that. So we're wired to be aware of fear. You think about our evolution. Imagine we're on the savannah, something comes up, and we don't know what it might be, but the fear response kicks in, and now we're in high alert. And so if something were to come out and, eat us, that fear and that stimulus to kick off and move, fight, or flee, totally useful. There's not a lot of room for error there. You can't, be in bliss while being eaten alive, so to speak. But what happens is that starts to just run incessantly. And we're only that's only supposed to hit for a short period of time, and then we come back to our normal state. Well, in this case, it just is repeating itself again and again and again. And that kind of adrenaline, that sense of engagement, that feeling like you're doing something constructive, like it's alive. It's that alert, it's that intensity, it's that adrenaline, it's that experience. And I like how you said that it becomes a habit, and the way to reverse that is a habit. So right away in the morning, before the day gets started at all, very first thing is engage in mindfulness practice, straight from the onset. So you're coming out of sleep, and you're already, like, say, coming out of theta and into alpha, and you're already halfway there. So engaging in the practice, honing your attention, bringing yourself back again and again and again, and abiding in that calm state is really quite useful. And then you can do a lot of things in terms of savoring and building up positive emotions like gratitude, compassion, joy. But regardless, anchoring that practice in first thing. And then as you start carrying on throughout your day, you can do thin slices. You don't have to spend forever doing this. You can be like, okay, well, in the morning, mid-morning, 11 o'clock, I'm going to check in. And again, just bring myself back 10 breaths maybe. Throughout the afternoon, 2 o'clock comes, same practice. On the evening, engage into an audio right before you go to sleep. And so that then starts to kind of shift the tide there. And you can apply that into activities that you're doing. So you're engaged in something instead of things popping up and pulling your attention everywhere, shutting that all down and being single tasked as much as you can. And as the mind goes away, bringing yourself back. As the mind goes away, bringing yourself back. And every time you catch yourself and bring yourself back, that's the win. That's the joy. That's actually when you're building in that habit that'll serve you. And what starts to happen is it's like a wave, so to speak, where initially you start to get some experience in the beginning. You might not feel a lot of benefit. Keep up with that practice, and soon you'll start to experience a lot of benefit. And when you go back into your normal life, then it'll be like, okay, the honeymoon period's over and now you're in the thick of it again, hoping that you can stay in that. Well, with enough practice and integrating it into your day and changing your habits, the way you do your work, the way you relate to people, bringing your full attention there in the way that, checking in with yourself more often, that starts to become more the predominant state. And then over time, you can make a huge impact within a matter of a couple of weeks. That mindful state starts to become the predominant state. And, talk about it. Make it normal amongst your family and your friends. Your colleagues. Start to bring this up, like, oh, how are you doing? Are you keeping up with your practice? Say, make the goal for the next month. I'm going to do a mindfulness routine every single day without fail. If you fail, it's all right. Bring yourself back. Change that, but have accountability. Set up a structure there where you can be available, and then integrate that throughout the day. Make it super simple. It's just a reminder. It's something you do, like brushing your teeth. It's like mental hygiene, and reflect on that. Have you noticed any progress? Do you feel better? Have you related to people more effectively? Do you have better focus? Do you have a greater sense of well-being and contentment? Are you experiencing more joy? Do you have higher levels of performance? Noticing those benefits and seeing that progress over the days and the weeks is vital. You'll start to see its value, and you want to continue. You want to lean further into it because you recognize how it pays you back in tremendous ways.
And just relating to Krishna, he was just asking a quick question. How do you start off your day, Will? But before we get to that, how quickly, just let's just take an example. Tomorrow morning, everybody that's here gets up in the morning before they even go to brush their teeth or they start, by maybe taking 10 deep breaths, or for some of us, we if you know how to meditate, you sit down and you meditate. And then you sort of do the simple things you were mentioning. So have like a timer or a reminder or a way where you're checking in regularly with yourself every few hours of the day to kind of just measure the state that you're in, and then consciously take some breaths to kind of bring yourself back down and ground yourself into a more sort of still sort of place. But if you're starting to do that every day, how long before that does become the new normal? And before it's sort of an effort, what's the impact that can have in somebody, and in what sort of time frame, or like a significant impact? I'm sure it can have an impact immediately, if you're really doing that.
Yeah. 60 minutes, within 60 minutes of that time broken up over, say, a few days, you'll experience a difference. And if you lock that in for a month, you're going to experience a lot of change and improvement. It's like anything else. If you want to get fit and you want to have more energy, and say you get into, running, start small, get yourself in the habit. You're now starting to engage and move forward in it. But then as you start getting a little bit more capacity, stretch yourself. Do some sprints consecutively until you start building up your capacity, and then you'll gain that cardio. You'll gain that energy that you're after. So start.
It's small. Like a muscle, as you said earlier. So yeah. Do you mean if you're practicing in this way every day, keeping yourself checking in regularly, starting off when you wake up to take some deep breaths and kind of set the tone for your day, and really just it's kind of being intentional, being mindful, and just, as you said, thin slices through the day is better than big chunks. But are you suggesting 60 minutes throughout your day? Is that sort of, or over an amount of time, or?
Well, so I would say 20 minutes in the morning, thin slices throughout the day, and it could be just a check-in at like 5 minutes or less, and then some time at the evening. You might give that like 10 minutes. So as little of like 30 minutes in like a block time, between morning and evening, and those thin slices throughout the day will be enough to get you started, and you'll start to experience real value within a week's time.
And one thing I just want to we're about to finish up, but one thing I just wanted to remind people of, and remind you in a way of as well, is what the clients that Will works with. I mean, not everybody is interested, for instance, in learning to develop mindfulness meditation as a tool. Okay, so it's kind of up to the client, obviously. But we've seen amazing results with some of the clients we've worked with in terms of taking somebody who maybe has high levels of anxiety, or, you know, there's been people who've been in sort of very challenging circumstances, or even had very lofty goals from coaching. And oftentimes I've been amazed at the tangible results you've been able to help people to achieve. Sometimes it's the speed at which your clients are achieving those goals. And I think it always comes back to the same thing, which is about getting into that optimal state and about developing meditation and mindfulness as a day-to-day tool. So, you know, anyone that questions the tangible impact that this has, you know, we've seen it. I've seen it with so many different types of people through the work that Will has done with his clients, that it's kind of undeniable, really. You know, and I think you're a living, breathing example as well, an amazing example of somebody who really uses it. So it's you know, it's sometimes I think when we mention things like joy and, you know, emotional states, and I think sometimes people get a little bit nervous, but actually if you think of, like, as you said, our self-compassion, I think people get a little bit like, but it's like, if you think of it, it's a tool. Emotions are amazing resources. They're amazing tools. And kind of, if we take away the kind of bullshit conditioning of them being scary, you know, and just sort of say, okay, these are amazing tools. How can I speak the language of emotions? How can I understand them? How can I use them and start live? You know, again, that could be one of the first things you tackle, is just how we view our emotions. Could be an amazing thing to just start with, and then that allows you, it unlocks your ability to communicate really with yourself in a new way. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're able to kind of maybe check in. There's less resistance about checking in or feeling or getting into your body, because you're not as like afraid of what you're feeling, because it doesn't have all the baggage that, I mean, let's face it, it's just kind of learned BS, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's like emotional intelligence is a game changer, and the farther you go up, the more important that becomes, the more you relate with others. And if you want high performance, if you want to progress, if you want to achieve anything, gaining mastery over your mind is fundamental. Like being able to actually control and navigate this thing and move yourself forward in an optimal way. And mindfulness is at the core of it. You can't. How are you supposed to make progress if you aren't even aware of what's going on? Rather than, so you start there, and now you're starting to make adjustments and move forward. So it might be uncomfortable, it might be kind of new territory, but you know, people like, let's use this one, Ray Dalio, CEO of Bridgewater Hedge Fund. He's created, I think he's worth about 14.6 billion. He came from a lower middle class family, became Times 100 most influential leaders. Even if you gave him, I think it's like, you know, say 50 million to invest and to grow that wealth, he wouldn't be able to take it on, because he's working on advising countries like China. And so when somebody asked him, you know, what's the most important thing that you could offer? If you could just give one thing to friends and family, your children, what would it be? Out of all these resources and knowledges, he had mentioned mindfulness, essentially your ability to meditate and gain control of your mind. So it's critical. And everybody that I work with, if you dive in and work, start that practice first, everything else you want to achieve starts to happen much more effectively, effortlessly. And it's an absolute game changer. So by all means, check it out.
Nick has just mentioned he loves Ray Dalio. Yeah, so he's familiar with. So if anyone has any other questions or comments, we're going to just kind of finish up. Will, do you want to just talk us through a very quick kind of 1 minute mindfulness technique that everybody at home can kind of do, and people watching this afterwards, the recording, and we can end it then with that lovely high vibration kind of ending?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we'll do one on this whole self-talk. What's that person's name again?
Well, we have Nick and
Krishna.
Katie Axtell has just said, thank you, Will, very insightful. So thank you.
Cool. Awesome. So yeah, from the beginning, that self-talk piece. So we'll experience what's going on, the challenge that we all might have in any way, shape, or form, relate to it, and move ourselves in a healthier direction. So we'll just start off quick with a breath exercise. So if you could breathe in through the nose and hold it in your chest for a few moments, and then breathe out slowly. And as you're sitting in your chair, standing, aim for a dignified posture. You want to open your chest cavity out. 2/3 of our oxygen is absorbed by the lower half or lower third of our lungs. And so that posture is really key. So breathing in again through the nose, holding it for a few moments and releasing slowly. And we'll just repeat this one more time. Okay, and so breathing into the nose, holding it for a few moments, and breathing out slowly. Okay, so whether your eyes are open or closed, whatever suits you most. If they're open, just kind of have a fallen gaze. And we want to turn inward. So we start with the top of our head, and we'll just do a quick body scan. So observe, is there any tension? What sensations are coming up as you're looking, say, towards the temples, around the eyes? And I'll just guide you through, and here, just to be aware, no judgment, just a sense of curiosity and exploration. And all the while, as I'm guiding you through this, just kind of ride the wave of your breath, abiding in your breath, the inhalation and the exhalation as you're experiencing these sensations. So from the top, what experiences do you have as you're going down through? Is there any tension in the jaw? Warmth on your face, cool air. Heading down to the neck, any tension? Is it relaxed? Is there a temperature? Is there a texture? Moving into the shoulders. Again, if there's any tension, just release that. Moving down to the chest. Is there any tightness? Do you have a sense of openness? Is it warm? What's coming up? Moving down the diaphragm. How long you're breathing in and breathing out. Moving into the hips, where you're maybe meeting the chair, feeling a sense of weight, sense of groundedness. Moving into the legs, the upper thighs. Any tension, warmth, coolness, texture of your clothing. Moving down to the knees, into the shins and calves. And then again into the feet. What weight is there? Sense of groundedness. Great. And so this is a great exercise for honing your attention and becoming more aware, turning up the resolution. So that's it. We can go into a lot of other things, but I think that's just a little introduction to what a mindfulness body scan is.
I feel better already, Will, just listening to your voice. But just to finish up, so people can do that body scan if they do that a few times a day. That's that real just checking in with where you're at, where the stress is in your body, and even kind of getting kind of stillness enough to hear maybe what's going on, the tapes going on in your mind, so you can get out of the passenger seat and get into the driving seat, even just for the next few hours, and then check in again.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah. Thank you, Will. I always love hearing from Will. You're such an interesting guy and an absolute wealth of knowledge. We only touched the surface today, so we will certainly be doing more of these in coming weeks. So if you like this, keep an eye out for our page. We'll be emailing you afterwards with the replay as well. And I look forward to hearing from everybody. I'm sure we're getting loads of really lovely comments, so you're really appreciated. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Celine. Thank you, James. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all for tuning in, and keep checking us out. We've got another webinar tomorrow night. Actually, Mel Pritchard is from the team is going to be helping people on how they can manage their stress and anxiety, specifically more around kind of just their working day. So a little bit different. Mel's background is more from a mental health perspective, a little bit different to Will's. So definitely check that out and keep an eye out. Let's see what wonderful ways we can use you again, Will, and share your amazing knowledge. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, thanks, Evelyn. I appreciate it.
Okay, take care. Thank you, Tom. Oh, Tom, where can we access the notes you talked about at the start? We're going to email you. It's probably going to be in the morning with a replay of this webinar, and we'll just summarize the key points, and then Will can kind of send me some links. So we'll send you the links as part of the email. So, and then you feel free to email us, if there's anything that we're missing or that we mentioned that you would like to check out. But we'll get the links from Will. Okay, everyone. Signing out.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye, Will.
All the best.